For some reason, we were having some technical difficulties, but we are back. We are back. We are back. I'm getting ready to bring Miss Tiffany on, and I'm super excited to have her with us on tonight. And I'm back. Let me tell her. Super excited to have her tonight to talk about what it means to ride the waves of grief. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring her on without further ado and get Miss Tiffany to join us, and she can give us some background of who she is and all the things that she does. And so let's see. Come on. There we go. There we go. Great evening. Great evening.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on and being with us tonight. Y'all, we have with us on tonight Miss Tiffany Huggins, and she is from South Carolina. And so, welcome to Anchored by Grace. We're so excited to have you with us on tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and just sharing information and knowledge with your viewers and um, learning as well, just in terms of anything that your viewers may have to share or anything like that. So I am looking forward to tonight's conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to jump right in. I know had a
Mhm.
little technical difficulty earlier, but I know as we were talking before we came on, Tiffany has some credentials, and I love it. I love when someone is educated, and you can tell their passion for the work that they do by the credentials sometimes that they share. And so I do see there is the MED, there's NCC, there's some more. So if you can just give us a little bit of background of who you are, what you do, and just share with our viewers some of the things about your background and the population that you serve.
Sure. Like you mentioned, I do have some credentials. I am a licensed professional counselor as well as a supervisor. I am currently licensed in, I believe, 6 different states currently, providing different counseling services. I'm also a board certified coach, and so I just received that credential in
Oh,
November.
awesome.
So I do have a lot of training, not just in mental health, but also just helping individuals reach their goals. I also have certification in disaster mental health, as well as critical incident debriefings for different companies that have, major incidents on site, whether or not it's like a robbery or a death or employee death, downsizing of the company. So I kind of help to step in and just help the employees during those type of events. So those are some of my credentials. But ultimately, I work in loss and grief and life transition. So started out with hospice in South Carolina as a bereavement counselor. That's really where I got my foundation in loss and grief. And from there, just really have expanded my knowledge, not just death related losses, but other types of losses or transitions that we encounter, whether or not it's a divorce, a breakup, again, changes in work settings, just any type of major transition that someone goes through and maybe just needs a little bit more support and kind of navigating what life looks like possibly on the other side. That's kind of
Mhm.
where I focus a lot in my practice.
Awesome, awesome. I love when you mentioned that loss is not just some losing a loved one or someone who's close to us passing away, but that's very similar to what we teach with grieving with grace is that the loss is grief is the
Mhm.
loss of a person, place, or thing. So that is a
Correct.
divorce, losing a job, having to relocate. It could be the passing away of a pet, or
Mhm.
anything that is near and dear to our heart. I know for us, right after my son transitioned, a year later, our home flooded during Hurricane Ida. So it was
Mhm.
like back to back. So we were still processing the death of my son. And then in the same token, trying to process oh gosh, now we don't, our home is flooding. We got to pick up and go somewhere else and stay. So I definitely understand. And you said something earlier.
Mhm.
You said disaster mental health. Can you expound on that just a little bit?
Sure. So definitely, like you mentioned with the hurricane, when there are natural disasters, hurricane, earthquakes, um, tornadoes, and a community is disrupted, I have training in kind of helping those individuals kind of stabilize themselves right after a major disaster. And so that's some
Mhm.
of the training that I also have as well.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And so, to our viewers tonight, I do ask that you would share, that you would tag someone in this post for someone who may need some additional. There may be some additional questions, some things that they may have some about. Please feel free to post those questions in the comment section, and we will be happily, I'll be monitoring that in between me having conversations with Tiffany. And so we're going to jump right in and kind of talk about tonight's segment of riding the waves of grief. And so I know people may have seen that title. And so can you just share with our viewers tonight, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean to ride the waves of grief?
Sure. So, a good analogy that I utilize is like grief is like the ocean, right? When we think about the
Hmm.
ocean, sometimes it's scary, it's unpredictable, but also the waves that come with it are very natural, right? So we know that
Hmm.
the tide is going to come in and come out. Sometimes we don't know how forceful, right, the waves will be, but we know that they're coming. And so when I equate that to grief, grief is scary. Grief is unpredictable sometimes. It can be
Hmm.
messy. And there are times in our lives when we're navigating grief where we know that there may be activating events or conversations or situations that might impact our grief. Sometimes we don't know if, it's going to be something that's really going to, take us out per se and make us feel like we're going back to the
Hmm.
beginning of our grief journey. And sometimes it may just cause a little ripple. And so, with that analogy, when I talk about riding the waves of grief, is going along with the natural progression of it. I think sometimes
Mm.
people feel like, oh, I have to do like this great big thing in my grief. Sometimes it's just the smallest thing that can kind of help us lean into the natural grief responses. And so that is kind of what riding the wave is. It's not resisting, even though, it's uncomfortable. We don't like what it feels like when we're going through grief, but sometimes that resistance can make it harder to move through it. So it's kind of noticing what is coming. We know the special days, we know possibly, holidays,
Hmm.
we know different things are coming. So how do we kind of ride the wave of any intense emotions, anything that may come with
Hmm.
it, and just kind of allowing ourselves to feel or do what feels natural to us as we go through it and kind
Hmm.
of go back to maybe a more settled state.
And I know there were a couple things that you said and that I want to mention. So there's a friend therapist of mine. Well, he's actually on our board. And one of the things that he mentioned some time back was, when those waves, so to speak, when they come, we need to, as a person who grieves, we need to be willing to put on the
Mhm.
floaties and just kind of ride the wave out, knowing that at some point it's going to settle
Right.
down. And so just kind of, put those floaties on and just allow it to
Yeah.
go with wherever the grief is taking you, and be willing to settle in where it is, knowing that you will eventually come out of that wave of grief. Is that something that you would agree with that statement?
Definitely. If we're staying with the analogy of riding the wave, think of a surfer, right? The key thing about surfing is having the right tools. You have to have the right surfboard,
Hmm.
right? Like you said, you may have to have
Hmm.
floaties. You have to have things that are going to help you possibly not sink, right? And so I
Hmm.
definitely
Hmm.
agree that, having the coping tools, right, and remembering to use them, the ones that work for you as you're navigating this space to kind of help you guide through some of the more intense moments of your grief.
Yes, yes. So, one of the things that you mentioned, as you were sharing, you mentioned like there are some things that will come up, whether it's the anniversary, whether it's a birthday,
Mhm.
of the anniversary date of the death, or maybe it's the birthday of someone that has passed away. And so, I know those are sometimes often called triggers for
Mhm.
some people, or maybe people may not know what a trigger is. But so, for lack of just being able to ask the question, so when those triggers like anniversaries, birthdays, or songs, when those things actually come, how does that play into grief? And how can someone prepare for that?
Sure. I think a lot of times when we think of these special days, holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, sometimes it is just the day to day activities. It really impacts our grief in terms of sometimes it kind of makes us face the reality of them not being here. And a part of some of the work of grief is accepting the reality of the loss. And so sometimes with these
Hmm.
special moments and with these things, we're like faced with the reality. And so with that comes all the emotions with that loss, whether or not it's anger, sadness, regret, whatever comes. And a lot of times those emotions are very intense. It's very
Okay.
intense. It's very intense. And so when you have these reminders, right, that come up, um, it can make you feel like it just happened all over again.
Mm. Is there anything we could do to, I guess, I don't know if I want to say avoid
Mhm.
it or to prepare for it, or do we just, it's just one of the things where we just ride the wave?
Yeah, we can't ignore it or avoid it because life continues and we have to face it. I think in riding the wave, it can be preparing yourself because you do know, Mother's Day is coming up, right? And I lost my
Hmm.
mother some years ago. So I know that it's coming. And so I can prepare myself for that, right? It doesn't mean
Hmm.
that I have to
Hmm.
have all the answers or like a mapped out plan, but I can anticipate possibly that it may be a harder day for me. So does that mean that I surround myself with family? Does it mean that I stay off of social media, which I usually do? I'll kind of back away from social media because it's a little hard for me to
Hmm.
see, all of the posts and people with their mothers. And
Hmm.
so I think it is important for a person to know what they need. And a part of that is sitting
Yeah.
with yourself and being aware of, okay, you know what, maybe I need to be around people, or maybe I just want to lay in bed. Maybe I want to do a combination of
Hmm.
the two. Maybe I just want to see what happens, right? Maybe I don't want to have to plan. I don't want to think about it too much. But I think a part of that is sitting with yourself so that you can know what your
Hmm.
body is telling you of what may work best for you in this moment, and that you have the right to change your mind.
I I love that. I love the fact that you say we may need to sit with
Yeah.
ourselves. It may mean we need to spend some time, because so last year may have been I wanted to be with
Mhm.
family, but this year I may only want to be by myself
Right.
and may not, and that's okay if I'm on. And so I think for those people who are listening, and who and that was one thing for me, especially with Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Like my mom, there would be days or years that would go by where I'm okay. And then there would be times I could be in Target or Walmart and people are buying Mother's Day
Mhm.
cards, and I'm looking at people side eyed, like, why are you buying a Mother's Day card? And I had to check myself, is to say, because your mom is not here, Pam,
Right.
don't try to rob someone else of their moment of being able to celebrate their mother who is still here.
Right. Right.
So it's
Yeah.
okay to sit with ourselves and for things to be different, if I understand that correctly.
Yes, yes, yeah, and sometimes that's hard to accept, but it's
Hmm.
necessary. It's necessary. It's necessary, because I think in grief you learn a lot about yourself. If you take
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
time to do the work, and what is needed, you can learn a lot about yourself and you can grow through your grief. And so a part of that
Hmm.
is sitting with yourself, so that you can know how do you grieve and how do you process different situations.
Yeah, well, that's good. Thank you for sharing that. And one, and we may have touched on it a little bit, but are there any healthy ways, or what are the healthy ways of riding out a strong wave of grief, if you will?
Yeah, yeah. I think again, it's having the right tools, which are our coping mechanisms. Everything does
Mhm.
not work the same way for everybody. So I think the key
Mm,
thing is finding what works for you. So I think that that is a part of it. But it could be, journaling. Okay, I'm going to step away and I'm going to allow myself to process my thoughts and my feelings. One good thing is to take time to say, what am I responding to? So this
mm,
conversation happened, or this song came. I had a distressing thought, and like, what am I responding to? Because there's a lot that comes up in grief. And so sometimes it's not just
mhm,
the loss of that person, but it could be the idea of who that person meant to you, what they represented. And so you're dealing with that part that you may have to come to terms with as well. So I think one of the best things is to kind of recognize, what are you responding to in this moment when this grief is being
mhm.
activated.
I like how you said it. We respond to grief based on basically the
Yeah.
relationship or the role that we may have played in someone's life or someone may have played in our lives.
Mhm.
And so that's how we respond differently. So I think that's important for us to take note of that, to know that it's okay to take a moment to be to ourselves or by ourselves if that's what we need.
Right.
And I think that's where the sitting with ourselves comes into place, to say, hey, this year I want to be to
Right.
myself.
Right.
This year I want to celebrate things a little bit differently. This year I want to invite people over for dinner, or I want to have a cookout.
Mm.
And so I think that's okay, for people to be able to be okay and to come to themselves to say, this is what I want. This is what I feel is best for me now
Right.
in this
Right.
season.
Yeah. Because I think too, it's very easy, and I think a lot of us can relate. It's easy just to kind of go along with whatever is happening without really taking inventory of, is this helpful for me? Right? Is this what I need?
Mm,
Does
mhm.
this serve me in this moment? Does this aid my healing process? But because this is what we've always done as a family, then we just kind of go along with it, and then we suffer in the midst of it.
I think that's probably sometimes what get
Mhm.
families, is because, hey, okay, so for Thanksgiving, we were always at Big Mama's
Yeah.
house. So if I now go against the grain and I say I don't want to go to Big Mama's house, then everybody's going to be looking at me crazy, because now she know we've always gone to Big Mama.
Right.
So why does she not want to go?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, but it's okay for us to do what's best for us and our healing. And one of the things that I will say, I know for my husband and I, with our son, I like to see
Yeah.
pictures. He didn't particularly care to see the pictures initially. Like, he was like, it's too
Right.
much. And I was like, so we got to find a healthy balance, because this is what makes me feel good, is to come in and to stand and look at a picture when he doesn't necessarily care to see them all the time. But now, I mean, it took us a moment to get to the point and to be able to communicate and to come to a middle ground, to say, okay, well, then we need to find, he may not be ready, I may not be ready, but we have to do what's best for each of us. And so in that, what would you recommend being a healthy boundary of finding a safe place for two people who want something differently?
I think first is communication, being able to communicate.
Mhm,
Because oftentimes what we do is we withdraw, and we are dealing with all of these thoughts and feelings, and we're not communicating possibly to
mhm,
the people around us who can support us or can help us through of what it is that we do need. So I think the first part is being able to communicate, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I really do enjoy, these pictures or having these symbols around
mhm,
me, you know, and like you said, for your husband, he can say, well, okay, you know what, this is not the best for me. And then y'all can kind of talk through, okay, what does that look like? So does it
mhm,
mean that there are pictures in a certain part of the house? Does it mean that, I keep a picture on my phone, like whatever that is? But I think it starts with the communication, because oftentimes we'll
Mhm.
kind of lend into kind of like, well, you should know type of the aspect, because you're my husband, because you're my mom, or because you're my sibling, like you should
Mhm.
know. And that's not true, because sometimes we don't even know.
Right. I know you're right
Yeah.
about that. Yes, yes. So this is great conversation. For those of you who are just joining us in this conversation, this segment of Anchored by Grace, we have Tiffany Huggins from South Carolina, who is sharing with us what it means, what it looks like, feels like to ride out the waves of grief. And so that's going to bring me to my next question that I would like to discuss is, how do you help someone who feels like that they're stuck in grief? How do we help them?
That is so hard, because sometimes there's very little that a person can do, because when we're going through grief, we have to go through it. So it can be very difficult, especially, depending on how um, strong a person's grief is. But I think
Hmm.
ideally, your presence, that matters a lot. Um, Whether or not it's physically showing up, or is it, sending a text of, hey, I'm thinking about you. I know that this may be a hard day or a hard week, or a hard moment for you. I think also providing practical support. I know
Hmm.
oftentimes, anybody who has gone through grief, you'll hear people say, well, let me know if you need anything. And that is, again, that's a challenge, because you're putting the responsibility on the griever. Um, Versus
Hmm.
if you know that, I don't know, they have a dog. Hey, I'm coming to get your dog today. Or, hey, I'm going to provide breakfast. Like, just doing what you know is
Hmm.
helpful, that can help. That can
Hmm.
help them from having to make yet another decision, or again, more responsibility when they are in the thick of grief, of trying to figure out other type of probate or other business things, like that practical support. Hey, have you gotten out the house today? Let's go for a walk. Small things like that. I'm going to get the kids and I'm going to get them
Hmm.
to school. Like those type of things can kind of help free up space for the griever to really kind of focus on
Hmm.
what they need, and what is going to work best for them, to get the rest that people tell us to get, but we really don't have
Uh-huh.
space to do it
Uh-huh.
because we have other responsibilities that sometimes takes us away from focusing on our grief.
I love, and I've never heard it put, is that we're putting the responsibility on the
Yeah,
griever. Like I never thought about it that in that respect. Is that it's already hard, and it makes sense now. Is that it's already hard for someone who is struggling with grief, and then for you to ask me, like, what do I want to eat?
yeah,
Like that's too much for me to even focus on, rather than you saying, hey, I'm going to bring you some food over, or just do it sometimes. And I know I've told people before, it's better to not necessarily ask questions. I would rather you do something than to ask questions about it. If you want to do
right.
something, then just do it rather than asking a question about it.
Right, right. Because we're already overwhelmed in our grief. Right there. We are
Mhm.
trying to just make it from day to day, moment to moment sometimes. And so just to take, that responsibility, because oftentimes we don't know what we want to eat. We don't have an appetite. So we're not thinking about food,
Mhm.
right? And so just to say, hey, there's something at your doorstep, or, I'm
Mhm.
picking up some groceries. I'm going to wash the dishes. I'm going to do your laundry. Like small things like that can make a huge difference. And like
Mhm.
I said, sometimes it's just
And
the presence of having somebody there that can kind of help someone move through a little easier.
and so I want to say to those who are listening, and you may know someone who is actually grieving. There are some great things that Tiffany has just shared with us to how you can show up for someone without asking what to do. You can just do it. I know a few months back, I was actually sick and was hospitalized, and I had a friend. she just called, we were talking and she was like, hey, so listen, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to order some things off of Amazon and I'm going to have them shipped to your house. And first she was like, I'll bring it, I'll drop it off at the door. You don't have to open. She said, you know what? I'm just going to order it from Amazon. I'm going to order you some things that you can try it, see if you like it. And then if I need to get some more, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
So those are things that we could do without even necessarily asking permission, because people like, I appreciated that, to
Right.
just, hey, you need to drink water, okay, I'm gonna have it shipped to your house. I'm gonna try some different flavors, let you try some things that I had. And so these are ways that we can show up for
Yeah.
people who are grieving and not have to put the responsibility on them to tell you what it is that they need or what they would actually like.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
So what type of advice would you give to someone whose grief is affecting their work, or maybe relationships, or even their health?
Yeah, I think in grief, those are the things that are impacted the most. I still have an issue with the current bereavement policy. I do not think that 3 to 5 to 7 days is adequate time for anybody encountering a major loss to say, now I'm going to perform as usual, right?
Hmm.
So when we're talking about work, for a lot of us, we have to work. There is not a lot of options when it comes to not working. So when I talk to clients, and even for myself, it's taking breaks when you need it, right? For
Hmm.
some people, work is a good distraction. Like I can go to work, I don't have to maybe think about my grief or anything like that. So that can be a good distraction. For some people, it is hard to concentrate. It's hard to focus. It's hard to be around people and people asking, well, how are you doing? Or tiptoeing around. Like that can be
Hmm.
hard, right?
Hmm.
So if you're able to take breaks, then take the breaks that you need, right? Like make sure that you're giving yourself permission to step away, to maybe say no to certain responsibilities at work, whatever it is. Even if for some people there is, FMLA or short-term disability, depending on how you're being impacted, to say, okay, I need
Hmm.
an
Hmm.
extended time away from work so that I can focus on myself and do what I need to do so that maybe I can know how to return to work and be productive. So I think that's
I
huge.
know for me, my job, where my previous job was very very helpful, because it was definitely hard for me to get back to work. As much as I thought it would be a distraction, I would start out great and I would plummet.
Mhm.
And so I realized, you know what, I don't think I'm
Yeah,
capable of coming back to work for 5 days a week and 8 hours a day. And so, I was able to take an extended
yeah.
leave. And then when I came back, I was able to just work three
Mhm.
days, 2 days a week. And then I worked my way up to doing 3 days a week, and where my days were a little bit longer. And so it was just, it was very beneficial. It's a blessing when we have jobs that is open and understand
Right.
that I may not be able to come back and perform the way that you did. And like, I've never thought about you mentioning like the bereavement policy. Like that's not a whole lot to
Mhm.
ask, to give someone 3 to 5 days of
Right,
bereavement. And if you don't have PTO or vacation time, you're
right.
doomed, And so that I've never even considered that. I just took what I thought I
Yeah.
needed to,
Yeah.
and so I was very thankful and fortunate.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that definitely takes a hit. But then, like you mentioned, even our health, right? I think sometimes that is the first thing to go. I know in my most recent loss, a couple of years ago, um, yeah, I all I did was sleep. Like that was the comfort that got me through. And so, yeah, if you're not eating correctly, your energy levels are going to be impacted. My iron, my
Mhm.
vitamin D was horrible, right?
Yeah.
And so I have one of my best friends, like she would text me and ask me, "What have you eaten today?" Right? Did you go outside today? Like little things like that that would kind of help, like,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, like, okay, what is the smallest thing that maybe I can do? Right. And so, getting a physical, dental appointments, Like, those things
Mhm.
are important. Now, I'm not gonna say that they aren't hard because, yeah, sometimes that the depression really hits to where that is not on your mind. But, it is
Mhm.
important to maintain some level of care for yourself because that also is gonna impact how you grieve too. Because you don't want it to be that now you haven't gotten your dental appointments, now you have to deal with cavities or root canals, and that just kind of adds onto
Adds
it,
adds
right?
to it.
So, if you're able to kind of stay on top of those things, maybe it's just, okay, I'm drinking water, I'm gonna have me a protein shake. Maybe I don't want to cook, maybe I don't have a big appetite, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to put something in my
Mhm.
body because I have to fuel my body so I can keep moving forward.
Yes, yes. And so now I want to move into some things. What should we say to people? What should we avoid saying to people when they're grieving? Because that's such a big one. And I think we probably touched on it each time, but it's going to be great for
Sure.
me to hear a different perspective. And so, what are some helpful things to say when someone is grieving? Or I know presence, showing up,
Yeah.
and sometimes it may mean not saying anything, but just showing up. But what should we avoid saying when people are grieving?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll start with this. Sometimes I think it's better to focus on listening than what to say.
That's good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
listening to where that person is, because that'll kind of give you an idea of, okay, where do I need to be in this conversation. But also
Mhm.
I think too, I think it is helpful to actually speak to their grief. So oftentimes we'll say, oh, how are you doing? I like to say, how is your grief today? Right, because overall most of the
Mhm.
time we're okay-ish, so it's easy, but if you ask me
Mhm.
directly, like, "How is your grief today?" There's less chance of me to be maybe dishonest or cover up,
Right.
right,
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
how I'm
Mhm.
doing. So I think kind of being able to
Mhm.
speak to that, but also sometimes it's just as simple as, "I'm thinking about you. I know this may be difficult for you. Like, I haven't forgotten." Giving an opportunity for them to speak about their loved one, if it's a loved one loss.
Mhm.
I think sometimes I know for myself, I long to be able to speak about my mother. I long to be able to speak about my boyfriend, and I don't always have spaces to do that because I know it makes people
Mhm.
feel uncomfortable when I
Mhm.
am not
Mhm.
well, right? Or if I'm sad or showing some sort of
Uh-huh.
emotion. But I think a lot of time we do long to be able to say their name, to be able to share
Yes.
memories and just how impactful they are, or they were in our lives. So I think like be able to create that space of, you know, having those conversations and talking. So I think, just being able to do that is very helpful. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, again, I think it's just, taking out, I think, judgments of, oh, like you should be
Mhm.
doing this by now, or oh, you still are in the bed, right? Like, so sometimes, like, we
Yeah.
people are concerned, but it can come off as judgment without connecting the dot. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, the reason why I'm still in bed is because I'm grieving. The
Right.
reason why I don't feel like going
Right.
to this social event because I feel lost in the world now, right? And so, those type of things I think is worth being mindful of, is that we're not coming off as like we're telling people what they should or should not be doing, or they're not further.
By a time frame.
Right, right. That, oh, it's been a year. You're still in this space. Well, yeah, I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe that it's often until someone has experienced
Exactly.
something that is close to them to where it hits hard. It's one thing that maybe my cousin passed away, but if my cousin and I were not close, then this is just a cousin who passed away. And I'm really sad that this happened. But if
Right,
this is my cousin, that we were like sisters, then that hits a lot different. And so I think, the judgment of how far along I should be
right.
by this time, because everybody grieves at a different
Mhm.
pace. and differently. And so there I often say that there's no time limits.
Right.
And even with the stages of grief, they don't come in this numerical order, and they don't hit this way. I mean, you may skip, I may deal with one thing one way when my husband or my daughter is they're on a different stage of grief.
Yeah.
And so I think, you're saying just, not to be judgmental
Mhm.
is is a great way of people who are not the ones that's in the thick of it. It's a great way for someone on the outside to look in to say, you know what, maybe I was being a little bit judgmental.
Yeah.
Maybe I came across too strong,
Yeah.
in saying what I
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. That's why I say, I think it's more important to listen than to try to speak, because you can hear what a person is saying, right? And that'll let you know that, okay, you know
Hmm.
what? Yeah, I hear that you're still struggling. You know, I'm thinking about you,
Hmm.
whatever it
Hmm.
is, right? But you can listen to see where they are, and that can kind of help guide you as far as how do you respond versus
Yes.
just making an assumption of, oh, well, I know y'all weren't close, so they're not experiencing grief. Well, yeah, even though I may have a complicated relationship with somebody, doesn't mean that grief isn't still present for me in some way.
That's right. That's right. Um, and I think there are so many great things that you have mentioned tonight and that we've touched on. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about what it looks like, feels like to ride the wave of grief, and knowing that there are the highs, the lows, and often we need to just ride it all the way out. One of the things that I've learned personally is don't stop it.
Yeah,
Like, I just, if I feel like there are times to where I want to listen to a song so that I could feel the emotion of grieving my
yeah,
son. Like I don't ever want to, and people often will say to me, "Oh my gosh, you're doing so well." I don't ever want
mhm,
anyone to mistake the fact that just because I'm doing what God has called me to do does not mean that I don't grieve my son, that I don't grieve my
right,
mother, that I don't grieve those people who are close to me. It's just that God has given me a grace to be able to do it. And so there are moments to where I want to listen to this song. I need to hear this again because something that it said, I need my emotions, my feelings need to need to feel that
yeah,
so that I don't ever, try to escape me grieving my son,
right, yeah,
and so
yeah.
is that something, do you find that that is something normal or natural for people to want to come in touch with their emotions or feelings?
Definitely, I think it is necessary in grief. We have to allow
Mhm,
ourselves to feel the full range of feelings. And, we call it, in the grief world, like one of the tasks of grief, right? Like to feel the full range of emotions. I know, like I said, with this most current loss of my boyfriend, like I purposely made sure that I was not touching alcohol, right? That like
mhm,
I wanted to feel it. I wanted to experience it. Um because I wanted to be able to build that emotional muscle. And so I think that's a part of it too.
mhm,
It's like, okay, like I know what it feels like when, his birthday comes and the emotions that come with that. Like I wanted that, and it was very difficult. It still is difficult, right, in some aspects. But I think it's very necessary for us to allow ourselves to feel fully, to experience all
mhm.
those emotions. Because a part of that is grieving out loud, right? Because that can be
Yes.
helpful for those around us, not just ourselves. Because I think a lot of times we do
Mhm,
kind of hide in our grief, right? We do kind of isolate for different reasons, or we try to like swallow it. And then yeah, sometimes like, oh well, she's fine, like oh, right, and it causes people not to care for us maybe the way that we really need. And so, I think it's important to the natural part of grief is the emotions, right? For some people, it may not be as intense as others, but it's very natural, and it's natural for us to feel it.
so do you think, well, I know for me when I was dealing with my son initially, when someone would say, "Hey, how are you?" and I would say, "I'm okay."
Mhm.
until I realized you're lying to
Yeah.
yourself and you're lying to, I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm saying lying and that may be a little bit too strong, but I just felt like I was not being honest
Yeah.
to the people that I felt like really were concerned about me and my
Mhm.
well-being, until I had to come to a reckoning with myself to say, okay, the next
Yeah.
time somebody asks you how you're doing, if you're not okay, then you need to be honest, you need to be truthful, and you need to say how you're feeling, because how can they help you
Right.
if every time they ask you, you're okay?
Yeah. 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 And I think too
Why do you think we
that kind of, because it is easy to be like, "Oh, I'm fine," because probably in the grand scheme of things, right? Yeah, I'm still going to work, like, I'm doing the thing. So in the grand scheme of things, I may be fine. But again, if you ask me specifically about my grief, that may be different, right? And that can go for any instance. I may be doing
Mm,
okay, but if you ask me
mhm,
specifically how work is, that may be a different answer. And so I think that may
ah,
be a part of it. Like holistically, I'm okay. I'm doing what needs to be done, right? But I may be struggling specifically with this one thing here, or I may be facing a challenging moment here, or I'm anticipating, something happening in this realm. And so sometimes it's asking the right questions um, to
okay.
really maybe get a truthful answer. Because it may be like, "How are you doing?" Okay, but how are you really doing? Right? Like,
Mhm, 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 mhm. Whew,
yeah,
wow. I hope you all are enjoying this conversation as much as I am. It's so you could never get enough of
yeah,
understanding what it's like to grieve and to understand the different emotions, the thoughts, the processes, the decision. You know, I often say to people that you have to decide. There's a decision to want to grieve,
mhm,
because sometimes people may feel as though that me getting up and getting back to work, me, going back to my life or attending a barbecue, that I'm
yeah,
forgetting about the person that's no longer here with me. But that is so far from being the truth. I think it's necessary that we get back to as much normalcy as we possibly could, and take on the things that you're able to do.
mhm.
And if that's being around people, maybe not being around people may not be your thing. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on that point of view.
Yeah, I think a part of it, and I think I'll say for myself personally, um, I wanted to be intentional about how I showed up in the world. And that was a part of something that I paid attention to in my grief. Because life still does go on around us. And there are still beautiful
Uh-huh.
things that are happening even though we're in this space of grief. And there's room for both. I think a lot of times people do kind of hold on to the thought of like, well, if I'm not feeling this intense emotion, if I'm not crying, if I'm not doing these things, then it means I'm not grieving. It means that I'm forgetting the
Mhm.
person, or they didn't mean that much to me. And that I think that's far from the truth. That there is space for both grief and life, and it's kind of
Yes.
finding and being okay with that, and um not feel like you have to convince others that you're still grieving, and being okay if people don't understand, or they don't get it, because they haven't gone through it possibly, and so they don't really
Mhm.
understand the intensity, or how it can be 10, 12 years later and you're still impacted a certain way by your grief. So I think that is a part of it, is being okay with your grief being your grief, even if nobody else gets
Mhm.
it. And I think that's hard because a lot of times we want to be understood. We want, there's a part of us that we want, like, I want you
Mhm.
to understand why I'm behaving this way, or why I am different. But a lot of times people are not going to truly get it because they're not experiencing it as you are.
Mhm. That's really good. And I knew this would happen just the way I thought. Like it's 7:50 here, 8:50 where
Yeah.
you are. And the conversation is It's so good. There is one thing, one last question that I would like to ask, and then I'll leave space for you to give us any closing
Yeah.
remarks. As it relates, I know you primarily work with adults,
Mhm.
but I know earlier when we were talking offline, you said that you have done some work in the past with children. Is there anything that school systems, you feel that the school system can do to better support grieving children in the classroom, in a classroom setting? What can the school system actually do to support children who are grieving?
Yeah, I think, definitely utilizing the, school counselors, is definitely
Hmm.
well. I know when I was working with children, actually, I conducted grief groups, because there was a lot of divorce, there was a lot of death, there was a lot of
Hmm.
incarcerated parents, and even now, unfortunately, we are dealing with the aftermath of maybe school shootings and things of that nature. So I think
Hmm.
definitely, one, creating space for children, not just after something happens, but being proactive in teaching children as well in regards to what does loss and grief look like for them, and giving them space to understand what it looks like.
Hmm.
Definitely age appropriate, of course, but I think kind of providing that space and educating teachers as well, and making sure that they understand what does loss and grief look like in children, when it comes to maybe especially younger children, behavior disruptions, right? Different things
Hmm.
like, so
Hmm.
being able to pick up on that, and maybe having different things in the classroom that can kind of help support. So is it a quiet down corner? Is it kind of utilizing different tools that can provide that space? Because it's very hard for children the same way it is for adults, right? And they don't always have the capacity to be able to put words to what it is they're feeling. So I think kind of having different spaces of education can definitely be helpful in a school setting as well.
Hmm. This has been such a great conversation, and it's necessary. And I know one of the things I mentioned earlier when we were talking offline is um, when there are resources like this, we need to take advantage of it because people don't like to talk about grief. As much as it's a real,
Mhm.
it's a natural, it's a normal part of life, and people don't like to necessarily talk about it often, and especially in the church.
Mhm.
And that's where, if it's going to come from any space, it should come from a faith-based place because we have prayer, but prayer is good, but there are times you need more than prayer.
Yeah.
You need therapy, counseling, and prayer. You need people to show up in the spaces to help you to do things for you that you may just don't feel like doing for yourself. It could be that you want a salad from Chick-fil-A or wherever, but you know what? I don't have the energy to even to
Mhm.
go and pick it up, even though I can stay in my car and drive through the drive-through. But if there was an organization or a ministry in the church that would say, hey, would check on me from time to time, or whomever it may be, this is where we can actually can be of service to someone, that family members don't necessarily have to show up. And
Yeah.
so I'm especially thankful for you, Tiffany, taking time out of your schedule. You're an hour ahead of where we are here in Louisiana, those of us who are on Central Standard Time, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
And I think that it's necessary that we do things like this. And so I want to take a moment before I yield the floor to Tiffany to give her last final remarks. This is what we will do this once a month virtually. On May the 10th, we will have our in-person grief support group meeting that takes place at 11 o'clock at the parish government building. We do that once a month. Also, I want to invite you, if you are within the Hammond Ponchatoula area, Empowering Kingdom Growth will be hosting the National Day of Prayer next Thursday evening at 5:30. We're doing a prayer walk where you will receive prayer focuses along the prayer walk, the journey of walking. So you will receive those prayer focuses and to help you to pray. So you can go to the website that is showing weareekg.com to sign up for the prayer walk, as well as there will be a prayer service. There are lots of churches who are joining forces with us to provide free food, beverages, and other resources that will be out, as well as one of the things that we do with Grieving with Grace, specifically for women, on May the 8th. You can go to the same website that is showing and sign up to be a part of the Grace Project, the women's edition. That is free. It's a time for the women to come together. We laugh, we do silly things, we have fun, but we also talk about the reason why we're there, but just in a different environment, a different setting. So please go to the website, sign up, share this information. Maybe if it's not for you, it may be for someone else. Again, thank you for joining us on tonight. So Tiffany, I want to yield some space for you if there's something that you would like to share with our viewers before we end this segment.
Sure. So I'm just going to bring it back around to riding the waves of grief. And like I said before, I kind of likened it to the ocean. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about being a prepared surfer, right? So the first thing when I was thinking about this is you have to know your ocean. You have to know what you're dealing with. Knowing how you grieve is very important because everyone grieves differently. So being able to reflect on that is very helpful so that you kind of know what is going to be the best way, or what is what you're working with within your grief. Also having the right tools, like I mentioned before, having the right coping skills, knowing what are the things that help to keep you grounded, right? So that you don't float too far out into the ocean. So whether or not that's family, friends, whatever that support is, I think we actually thrive within community. So being able to find out who is a part of your community that can be that safe space and that consistent support, I think is helpful. Also leaning into it as well. Grief is very uncomfortable, and we don't like feeling uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So, being willing to kind of lean into it. So again, you can kind of build that emotional muscle. So as you move forward, you're a little bit more fortified as you're navigating life and loss and transitions. And then I think lastly is understanding that wipeouts are normal and natural. So we're not always going to get it right. And just because we aren't crying doesn't measure our grief, right? There are going to be times that we don't cry. There are going to be times that we are able to navigate normally, and things are going to happen that it's going to bring the tears, right? And that's okay. It's normal. It's a part of grief, and it's healthy. And so I think a part of that is just there is no perfection in grief, right? You're learning about yourself. You're learning what you need as you move through it, and it's taking those moments so that you can apply it whenever something else comes up again. So I think it's being patient with yourself, being patient with the process, and giving yourself permission to do what you need to do that's going to help you move forward. So I think those are like the key things that I would want to leave with the audience tonight.
Wow. Grief, there's no perfection to it. I like that. So we're not going to always get it right. And so thank you again, Tiffany, for being with us tonight from South Carolina and sharing with us your expertise. And so thank you to all of our viewers who have who've tuned in. Feel free to continue to share this so that someone else may be able to partake in this information, maybe not tonight, but at some other point. And so thank you for being with us again. And I hope to see you all next week at the National Day of Prayer, or on May 8th or May 10th. So you can find all of these dates on the website at weareekg.com. And we'll be back here on the end of May for the next segment of Anchored by Grace. God bless you all, and I'll see you soon.